Our first speaker of today needs no introduction. Mr. Mikel Arana, Director General of Spain's national gambling regulator, DGOJ, has kindly agreed to deliver the conference keynote speech. Mikel, we are very happy to have you. As always, we are eager to hear what you have to say, and I'd like to invite you to the stage. That will be yours for the next while. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, there you go. Hello, good morning, all of you, and welcome. First of all, I would like to thank Gaming in Spain and its founder, Willem, for this invitation. It's very important for the DGOJ to maintain contact with all the Spanish operators and to some extent, even if we do not always agree, be able to explain firsthand why we make the regulatory decisions we make and what goals we want to achieve with them. As the Minister Garzón has mentioned many times, our goal since the beginning of this legislature has been the same: protect the consumer's right through the development of a gambling regulation law and the use of technological tools in order to provide a safer gambling space. And for this purpose, during this time we have approved the Royal Decree on Commercial Communications, the Royal Decree on Safer Online Gambling Environments, and we are going to modify the Royal Decree 1614 to implement the cross-operator deposit limits. We have had already the opportunity to talk in different forums about the Royal Decree 958 on commercial communication, so I won't extend on it. But after a year and a half since its entry into force, I'm pleased to say that most operators and offline media companies are respecting it. And despite some exceptions, so far we can say that we have achieved our goal, as I said, to protect consumers' rights, in this case, both players, for players and not players, about the excessive advertising that occurred. And that the whole process has moved forward without causing the bankruptcy that some of the markets may predict it. However, unfortunately, we cannot be as satisfied with regard to some of the online commercial communications, where there have been operators who have tried to evade compliance with the Royal Decree by using different offline marketing techniques. In any case, it is still too early to draw definitive conclusions, so we'll have to wait and see how the market adapts in the medium term and what new marketing models operators will employ in order to make a final assessment on the achievement of our objective. But as I mentioned before, we already have had the opportunity to discuss about this Royal Decree. So during the first minutes, I will focus on the Royal Decree 1676, dated March 14th, which develops safer online gambling environments and the cross-operator deposit limits. Starting with the Royal Decree, the first question, and probably the most obvious one, is why? Why develop a comprehensive Royal Decree on safer gambling when the previous Royal Decree, the one on commercial communications, already had an entire title on this issue, and I just say that it is still too early to make a definitive evaluation of it. Nothing more and nothing less than the data. What has led us to implement a new decree is that based on the data we have on the DGOJ, we realized that the second title of the Royal Decree 958 was not sufficient to protect the Spanish players' rights, especially those of the most vulnerable groups. Furthermore, if you look at the new decree, you will see that we have included the measures from the second title of the Royal Decree, as well as new ones. But above all, we have given a new approach to the player protection. In which way? In two different ways. First, by not treating all players in the same way. And second, by not letting players' protection depend on the criteria of each operator's corporate social responsibility, but by establishing a common minimum standard that can, of course, be raised. Regarding to this last point, the heterogeneity of the Spanish market, some of you may think, and I can agree with you, that the measures of responsible gambling of your companies go beyond to what the Royal Decree requires. So there's no need to implement a new regulation. In that case, congratulations, both for your high standard of corporate social responsibility and because, precisely for that reason, the adaptation of your system to the Royal Decree will be quickly, easy, and cost-effective. However, And I hope you may agree with me now, some operators in our market are far from what the Royal Decree is now made mandatory. And this is not just a perception. Contrary to what we have heard over the past 3 years, the Ministry of Consumer Affairs does not regulate based on perception, but on data. Data on your responsible gambling policies, but above all, data that certifies that the imbalance in the Spanish market is increasing exponentially in the recent years. We will come back to this topic later, which is absolutely critical to understand the structure and purpose of the Royal Decree. Remember, the goal is to provide safer gambling environment. Let's now focus on the main actors and review the measures included in the Royal Decree. The first question to clarify is, who is it aimed to? Who are we thinking of when we aspire to create a safe online gambling market? None other than the 1.5 million players in other words, all those individuals who have one or more gambling accounts with an authorized operator in Spain. This issue is fundamental to understand the rest of the Royal Decree. If we get caught in the 0.3% or 0.7% that, according to some statistics, may have a gambling disorder in Spain, then we haven't understood anything. The obligation of the DGOJ is to provide a safer gambling market for all players. Whether they have gambling problem, they don't have one, they might develop one in the future or not, in order to preserve their health. Let's think of this Royal Decree as the maximum speed limit on Spanish roads or the mandatory use of seatbelts in all vehicles. It's worth mentioning that in Spain, we have passed from 7,000 traffic-related deaths in 1988 to 1,145 in 2022, mainly thanks to the improvement of mandatory safety system, road infrastructure, and passive vehicle protection system. In other words, thanks to creating a safer environment for driving. And all of this with a percentage of 0.00%, 4% of deaths in relation to the total number of drivers. I see some faces of astonishment. Indeed, traffic regulation has nothing to do with gambling regulation, and a death has nothing to do with a gambling disorder. And I absolutely agree. But forget about the subject, and let's focus on the idea. The DGOJ doesn't regulate only to protect people with gambling disorders. It regulates to protect all consumers who have decided to gamble, whether it's once in a lifetime, once in a week, or once in a day. In fact, not everybody gambles in the same way. We know it. There are many types of players, and luckily, the majority don't develop a gambling problem and simply gamble for fun because they believe they can get rich or just because they feel like it. That's precisely why we have designed the Royal Decree for Safer Online Gambling environment with different protection measures for up to 5 different types of players depending on their playing behavior. The first group of players, the largest one, is a group that does not require additional protections. For this type of players, as you know, the operator must have some kind of measures as a person responsible for responsible gambling on their staff, a plan of active measure for responsible gambling, a staff trained in responsible gambling, a direct link for information, a 24/7 telephone service for responsible gambling and risky behavior, a set of measures aimed at assessing the desirability of players before including them in privileged customer programs, a specific message for new players, necessary tools for the player to establish a preset configuration for the licensed gambling sessions in other games and instant lotteries, specific self-assessment messages, and the ability to access the monthly summary of activity. In another word, a set of measures to provide all players the assurance that they are in a safe environment, that they will always be able to know the details of their gambling activity, and that they'll have people to turn out to if they feel they are losing control. The second group of players, the first one that requires special protections, is the group that exhibits intensive gaming behavior. This group of players, those who have incurred losses exceeding 600 euros per week for the 3 consecutive weeks, although they will still be able to continue playing, will have some restrictions compared to the previous week. Send a message, the operator will have set a message informing the player of these circumstances, that they are, as we said, intensive players, send them a message with a monthly summary of their activity, and not allow them to make deposits using a credit card. The third group of players, and the second one that requires special protection, is that of young participants. We refer to young participants as those players who are between 18 and 25 years old, since, as various studies show, early initiation into gambling activities increases the likelihood of developing a gambling disorder or is an indicator of the severity of such disorder if it's manifest. The measures for this group of players would be as follows. They will consider intensive players when they have losses of 200 euros in 3 consecutive weeks. They will receive a specific message alerting, among other things, the risk of early initiation into gambling activities, and they will not be eligible to receive promotional activities unrelated to gambling. The fourth group of players who will enjoy special protections are those who exhibit risky gambling behaviors according to the operator's criteria first, and according to the criteria determined by the DGOJ afterwards. The following enhanced protection measure will be applied for those players. The operator must provide the player with a clear communication regarding their categorization as a player risky behavior. They will be prohibited from receiving any kind of promotional activity. They will not be eligible for personalized customer support. They will not receive commercial communication, etc. The last group of especially protected players are those who have exercised self-exclusion and self-prohibition measures. Their accounts will be suspended, and they will not receive commercial communications. Furthermore, if they have decided to unsubscribe from the RIAG, they will receive a specific message reminding them of these circumstances and their previous gambling record. In addition, operators must perform periodic verification and cross-checks with RIAG to prevent impersonation of registered individuals, among other measures. As can be seen, this is a comprehensive set of measures that range from less to more as the player activities intensifies. For players whose gambling behavior initially do not imply a risk, these measures provide information to ensure that their activity is informed and conscious, rather than impulsive. On the other hand, players who have shown signs of potentially having problematic consumption are being protected to prevent them from developing a gambling disorder. In other words, the objective of the DGOJ is, as mentioned before, to provide a safe and informed gambling environment without subjecting the player to any form of judgment. However, as a regulator and part of the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, we cannot turn blind eye to an increasingly imbalanced market where operators raising profits depend on an increasingly intense playing behavior of a certain number of individuals. That is why, just as we had to regulate advertising, we have found it necessary to enhance the responsible gambling measures outlined in the Title II of the Royal Decree on Commercial Communication and approve this new decree. The number speaks for themselves. In the past 7 years, we have gone from an average expenditure of 313 euros to 574 in 22, representing an 83% increase. With increasingly young players, while in 2018, new players between 18 and 25 years old accounted 36% of the total, they now represent 52%. With a gross gaming revenue growth far exceeding any other sectors, going from 557 million euros in 2017 to 963 million euros in 2022, a 75% increase in profit with only around 200,000 more active players. Therefore, the top 1% of players in 2019 spent 318 million euros, representing 33% of total losses incurred by players and 42% of operator GGR that year. In contrast, in 2022, it's been the first top 1% of players represent the 43% of operators GGR that year. Looking at it from a different perspective, in 2019, the top 5 of players spent 630 million euros, representing 69% of the total losses incurred by players and 82% of operator GGR that year. In contrast, in 2022, it's been 82% of operator GGR this year. The general conclusion is that even though the player base is expanding, the more intensive players are becoming increasingly intensive and are, therefore, the ones losing the most money. From there, precisely, arises the need to address the last of the major project of this legislature, which is that of cross-operator deposit limits. As all you know, the system of cross-operator deposit limits is a persistent demand from association of rehabilitated players, and with a good reason. Let's go back to the data. 53% of the multi-operator players who have exceeded their maximum limit are part of the 5th percentile of losers. There is an undeniable relationship between surpassing the limits, doing so in more than one operator, being part of the group of people who lose the most money, and consequently showing symptoms of potentially having a gambling problem. The cross-operator deposit limit project, as you all know, has two dimensions, the technical and the regulatory, and both are heading in the right direction. Regarding the technical aspects, is it worth noting that its development is part of the next generation project, and in the coming weeks, we will be able to award it. On the other hand, the regulatory aspect will take a little longer, as it involves the reform of a royal decree, specifically Royal Decree 1614/2011, and we know what that implies. However, as we have proven on previous occasions, we are not so concerned about the timing as we are about ensuring that things are done with the highest degree of dialogue possible and allowing everyone to adapt to the changes. In any case, it's worth emphasizing that we see the cross-operator deposit limit system as an additional tool that we will make available to the players with the aim of providing a safe gaming environment. Therefore, it is intended to be a complementary system to operator limit and, of course, voluntary for the players. In fact, it will be available to the players through the players portal that manages the DGOJ, and the only ones who know their set limits of cross-operator will be the DGOJ and the player themselves. The operator will only receive a yes or not input from the DGOJ when checking whether they can proceed with making a deposit from a certain player or not. This last tool, to which we are fully committed, would be, if you allow me to say, the final piece of a puzzle that, as I mentioned at the beginning, seeks to protect the consumer rights, especially those of the most vulnerable group, by providing a secure market, by the use of technological and regulatory tools, so that gambling does not become a problem anymore. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mikel, if you could stay on the stage for 1 second, I think Mr. Arana kindly agreed to be open to questions from the audience. We have a few minutes for that. So if somebody has a question, please raise your hand. We'll get to you with a microphone. Raul, are you with the other microphone? Or I'll do the walking. So, sorry. If you can please state your name before you ask your question, that'd be nice.
Okay, thank you. Hi, thank you. Oh, it's not
Sorry.
Do I need to press one?
Yes. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Kat from Tombola, Gibraltar. I do have some questions, so thank you for being here and discussing the subject. So one of my concerns is actually, the introduction of new regulation, such as safer gambling, that was published on the 14th of March, and the joint deposit limits. You've talked about commercial communications. Is the DGOJ and the Ministro de Consumo considering to also adjust the types of infractions, like the fines we are paying? Because, I'm a little bit concerned. I've seen somewhere in the regulations that if a company has an infraction called grave in X amount of time, 2 times, it converts it into 1 muy grave, and it's a license suspension of 6 months, if I'm not incorrect, and also fine up to 100,000 euros. So I'm a little bit concerned with additional restrictive regulations and also considering that, the infraction can be adjusted. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. As you know, the legislatory finishes in 6 months. and that implies the change of the law. The laws are changed on the Congress, so there's no time at this legislature to do that change you are talking about, or the concern you are talking about. So for the time until at least the legislature, things will continue the same, because in other words, there's no time to make any change.
Thank you. We have a second question here. If you could please state your name. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Miguel Figueres from a recently created Spanish Sports Bettors Association. We are representing users. And just two suggestions. One of them is that have you thought about improving the education instead of restrictions in deposits? I mean, making users conscious about the risks they are getting when gambling, previously, some kind of prevention. And the second suggestion and commentary is about, do you think that these deposit limits would be able to prevent people to have this risky gambling behavior when thinking also about offline gambling with both ways of betting? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, thank you for both questions. Education is always a tool, a very important tool. We make our campaigns. We try to explain what are the risks of the gambling activity. There are different programs in schools, out of schools. So I think that's a task in where all of us should be compromised, and I think we're trying to do our best. And about the deposits, it's another tool. I mean, this is a total. There must be different tools that we can use, and this is one of them. If it will be only this one, probably it will have no use at all. But it's a compendium of different measures. So we think at the end, all of them, they can have some succeed, and we'll have, as I said before, a safer gambling space. That's at the end our purpose.
Thank you, Mikel. Good to have these two questions. I really appreciate you coming here today. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.